Hello, kiddies. For today's story, it's The Trumpet of the Swan. We see the book there? Do we see the swan? What has he got under his wing there? Do we see any trumpeter swans like that? Not swans that have trumpets, trumpeter swans. And here goes the story. Chapter 1, The Story of Sam. Walking back to camp through the swamp, Sam wondered whether to tell his father what he had seen. I know one thing, he said to himself. I'm going back to that little pond again tomorrow, and I'd like to go alone. If I tell my father what I saw today, he'll want to go with me, and I'm not sure that's a very good idea. Sam was 11 years old. His last name was Beaver. He was strong for his age, and he had black hair and dark eyes like an Indian. And he walked like an Indian, too, putting one foot straight in front of the other and making very little noise. The swamp through which he was traveling was a wild place. There was no trail, and it was all swampy and sticky underfoot, which made it muddy and walking difficult. Every couple of minutes, Sam took his compass out of his pocket and checked to make sure he was going in the westerly direction, the right way. Canada is a big place. Much of it was wilderness, and to get lost in the woods and swamps of western Canada would be a serious matter. As he trudged on, the boy's mind was full of wonder of what he had seen. Not many people in the whole world have seen the nest of a trumpeter swan. I know some children who have. Sam had found one on a lonely pond on this day in the spring. He had seen the two great white birds with their long white necks and black bills and beaks. He'd never seen any of this before in all of his life, and it made him feel really special. Giant swans. They were so much bigger than any bird he'd ever seen before. The nest was big, too. It was huge. It was a mound of sticks and grasses. The mommy was sitting on the eggs, and the male was just walking back and forth, walking back and forth. When Sam reached the camp, he was tired and hungry, and his father was frying up a couple of fish that they'd just caught for lunch. Where have you been? Asked Mr. Beaver to Daddy. Exploring, said Sam. I walked over to a pond about a mile and a half from here, the one we see from the air as we're coming in the airplane. It isn't much of a place, nowhere near as big as this lake we're on. And did you see anything over there? Asked his father. Well, said Sam, it's a swampy pond with a lot of reeds and cattails. I don't think it'd be any good for fishing, and it's hard to get to. You have to cross a swamp. Did you see anything? Said Mr. Beaver. I saw a muskrat, said Sam, and a few red-winged blackbirds. Mr. Beaver looked up from the wood stove, where the fish were frying in the pan. Sam, he said, I know you like to go exploring, but don't forget these woods and marshes are not like the country around our home in Montana. If you ever go over to that little pond again, be careful you don't get lost. I don't like you crossing swamps. They're treacherous. You could step in a sticky place and get sucked down into the mud, and there wouldn't be anybody there to help pull you out. I'll be careful, said Sam. He knew perfectly well. Ooh, look, we have a picture of Sam's daddy frying up the fish. Can you see that? And Sam there with his big stick, hanging around a campfire and a tent. Look at the big tent. He would be going back to the swamp again where the swans were, and he had no intention of getting lost in the woods. He felt relieved that he didn't tell his father about seeing the swans, but he felt a little strange about it too. Sam was not a sly boy, but he was odd in one respect. He liked to keep things to himself, and he liked being alone, particularly when he was by himself, said Yogi Berra. He enjoyed the life on his father's cattle ranch in the sweet grass country in Montana. He loved his mother, he loved Duke, his cow pony, and he loved riding the range. He loved watching guests who came to board at the Beavers' ranch every summer. But the thing he enjoyed the most in life was these camping trips into Canada with his father. Mrs. Beaver didn't care much for the woods, so she seldom went along. It was usually just Sam and Mr. Beaver. They would drive to the border and cross to Canada, and there Mr. Beaver would hire a bush pilot to fly the airplane into the woods, where the camp was for a few days of fishing and loafing and exploring. Mr. Beaver did most of the fishing and loafing. Sam did the exploring. And then, in a little while, the pilot would come back to take them back. His name was Shorty. They'd hear the sound of the motor on his airplane and run out and wave to him and watch him glide down into the lake with his airplane and drive the airplane right up to the dock on the big floats. These were the pleasantest days of Sam's young life. These days in the woods, far, far from everywhere. No automobiles, no roads, no people, no noise, no school, no homework, no problems, except the problem you could get lost. And of course, the problem of what he wanted to be when he grew up. Every boy has that problem. After supper that evening, Sam and his father sat for a while on the porch. Sam was reading a bird book. Pop, said Sam, do you think we'll be coming back to the camp again about a month from now? I mean, in about 35 days or something like that? I guess so, said Mr. Beaver. I certainly hope so, but why 35 days? What's so special about 35 days? Oh, nothing, said Sam. I just thought it might be very nice around here in 35 days. That's the craziest thing I ever heard of, said Mr. Beaver. It's nice around here all the time. Sam went indoors. Indoors? He went into the tent. He knew a lot about birds, and he knew it would take the swan about 35 days to hatch her eggs. And he hoped he could be at the pond to see the young ones when they came out of the eggs. 35 days. How many sleeps is that? That might be just around the time Belle comes back from seeing Titi. Well, Sam kept a diary, a little book that he wrote in every day, all about his life. And he kept it by his bed. And every night before he would go to sleep, he'd write in his book. He wrote about what he had done, what he saw, the thoughts he had, and sometimes he even drew pictures. He even ended up by asking himself a question, something he could think about while he was falling asleep. On the day he found the swan's nest, this is what Sam wrote in his diary as he was falling asleep inside the tent up in Canada. I saw a pair of trumpeter swans today on a small pond east of the camp. The female has a nest with eggs in it. I saw 3 eggs, but I think I'm going to put 4 in my picture because I think she was laying another one. This is the greatest discovery I ever made in my entire life. I did not tell Pop. My bird book said baby swans are called, do we know what they're called? Cygnets. Boy, that's a funny name. Cygnets. I'm going back tomorrow to visit the great swans again. I heard a fox bark today. Why does a fox bark? Is it because he's mad or worried or hungry, or because he's sending a message to another fox? Why does a fox bark? Sam closed his notebook diary and got into his jammies, crawled into his bunk, and laid there with his eyes closed, wondering why a fox barks. In a few minutes, he was asleep. And that's the end of Chapter 1.